Okay. So tell us who you are and what your area of expertise is.
Hi, I'm Eric Severson. I'm a philosopher. I teach philosophy at Seattle University, and I consider philosophy to be my area of expertise, though I'm also kind of interested in interdisciplinary work as it moves between philosophy and psychology, philosophy and theology. The philosophy of religion interests me as well. Uh, in most narrowly, my specialty is the work of Emmanuel Levinas, a 20th century philosopher.
What first interested you in Genlin's thought? Did you come to it early or late in your academic work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I came late to Genlin, although he operates in the same sort of philosophical circles that have interested me. I didn't take his work seriously or independently until about 5 years ago when I was teaching a course in the graduate Masters of Arts in Psychology at Seattle University, a course that's normally taught by Jim Risser. I think he was away for sabbatical, and so I was teaching it for him, and it was one of the standard texts used in the course. And after reading Genlin with students, I realized that this is a really rich voice to speak into contemporary questions of philosophical psychology and what it means to be a person and have a body and inhabit the world. And so ever since then, I've been quite interested in Genlin's work.
How has Genlin's thought influenced your own thinking?
That's a event in progress, and I hope to share some of that when I get a chance to have take part in the conversation coming up this April. But the area that I'll be working on in April and the ways in which he's most influenced my thought is by way of a close analysis of what it means to be there in the body, what's implied by my own body. I'm discovering that increased attention to human embodiment leads to some intriguing points about our social nature, about human beings as responsible or social, that our bodies carry with them an implicit solidarity with other human beings. So this is an outgrowth of some of what I've read in Genlin's work and the work of some people who've worked in Genlin, and it's come to interest me very much. One reason why that's particularly interesting to me is that my specialty is in the work of Emmanuel Levinas, who writes extensively about responsibility. And though he does speak a great deal about the body, it's in bits and pieces. And so embodiment, the notion of what it means to be a body and be embodied, are not sort of fleshed out in Levinas's work in the ways I wish they were. And it's in reading Genlin that I'm finding insights for saying it in ways that I think it needs to be said, to talk about what it means to locate responsibility in the body, or to say it better, to find it already located there in what happens when I am.
What do you think is the most exciting outgrowth of Genlin's work? What is emerging from his thought? And where do you see it taken, both in academia and outside of it?
I'm not the best person to ask about that because I still feel like I'm making my way through Genlin's work and into the field surrounded by his thought. But I'm very intrigued by the possibilities opened up by Genlin. One of the ways I think one of the things I appreciate most about the scholarship surrounding his work is that it is very naturally interdisciplinary, that it doesn't inhabit a silo where some ideas have to be partitioned off as pertaining to psychology or philosophy or any other subset. He's a scientist, a thinker of great precision, but also a person who does not exclude from his work all things that it means to be human, inclusive of emotion and the body and physical contact and all of these things that I think are so crucial. What Genlin can do and what work in the Genlin studies field, I think, can do and is doing is thinking holistically, not in the silos. In the academy, we tend to think in silos. We separate our work in philosophy from the work done in psychology or the other social sciences. I think that's unhealthy. And I don't think Genlin in his work had much tolerance for those who would push ideas, into silos instead of sharing them. There's this warm embrace of all the diverse ways that we can learn together in Genlin studies. That for me is a really important outgrowth of Genlin studies in recent years.
Who are some other thinkers who also interest you?
I have a wide range of interests, but of course, the work of Emmanuel Levinas is my most central research interest. But I've been looking to particular voices who can help in the application and understanding of Levinas today. Levinas last wrote at about 1990 and died in 1995. So it's been 30 years or so of work that's been done. And there are things that we know about Levinas's philosophy of responsibility that need work, both in the context of his corpus and aspects of thinking about responsibility today that can be taken up. So in that regard, I found the work of Hans-Georg Gadamer in thinking about responsibility in the context of history to be really interesting. So some of my recent work has pushed in the direction of reading and appreciating historicity through Gadamer. I've always had an interest in the work of Jacques Derrida and Martin Heidegger and some of the other thinkers like Edmund Husserl in the phenomenological philosophical tradition. And everything that I read in philosophy seems to pull me back to some of the classics, including the works of Plato and Aristotle. On top of that, I can't help but think that some of the wisdom that emerges from Eastern philosophy, especially the work of Confucius, the Tao Te Ching, but also the Bhagavad Gita, has captivated me in the Hindu philosophical tradition and also Buddhist texts. These are all wrestling with having bodies, being embodied in ways that point richly to what we can learn about ourselves in a careful, precise examination of our lives as we find ourselves living them in the world that we find ourselves thrown into. So I guess I've listed a few thinkers of interest to me, but I definitely am a very curious person and my interests range widely.
Can you tell us anything yet about what your paper will be, where what you're thinking about now, about what you'll discuss in April?
Yeah, the paper I'm working on for April deals with the implicitude of responsibility. So what I'm trying to do is take Levinas's statement that responsibility is the most fundamental of human conditions, that responsibility for the other is really the bedrock of what it means to be human, and see whether or not it's discoverable using Gadamer's method of the implicit, with a kind of precise evaluation of what it means to be here, to be embodied in this place, in this time, in this body, in this now. So I'm working through both Levinas's texts and Gadamer's text. I'm especially working with some of the later parts of his work, such as in Saying What We Mean in Genlin's work. Gadamer's notion of historicity helps me think about how we find ourselves thrown into the kind of the converging horizons of history. They're always happening and unfolding in our midst. In the midst of all of that, I want to ask the question, is responsibility implicit? In our close evaluation of our situatedness in this body, in this history, in this time, in the skin, do I find inherent or implicit in that there being responsibility for my neighbor? For me, that's an important question, especially in an era, in a time where we have this heightened awareness of the sort of rampant sexism and racism that abound in the world today. To what degree do I find inherent in my own body, in my own historicity, in the there being of me and my people and the people around me? To what degree is responsibility implied by that? So I'm chasing a few different research angles. I haven't written the paper yet, but have just gotten started on it. But I'm hoping by April, I'll be able to make the case that indeed responsibility for the other person isn't just an idea dropped on golden tablets from the sky, but we find it deeply implied in the body. And I'm hoping that Genlin's text is helpful for that.
And lastly, do you have recommended reading for attendees, what they might read prior to the conference if they have the time?
I do. I really would think people would want to get a hold of Saying What We Mean, this late collection, this posthumously published collection of Jen Lin's essays. And then once you get your hands on it, if there was something that I'd want to specifically point to, it'd be some of the middle sections of the book. I'm very inspired by the essay Words Can Say How They Work. But the stuff about the implied responsibility, I'm going to work on the 6th and the 8th chapter of this book in order to make that case, where he works on a chapter called Implicit Precision, and the 8th chapter is called The Derivation of Space. Those have been some essays that have that prompted me to propose a paper like this one.